Member for Nanaimo, Ladysmith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand again in this House to talk about the deep need for Canadian women and families to have access to affordable, universal childcare in this country, something that most other OECD countries have. Canada still does not. Here's the argument. Families need universal, affordable, accessible, publicly funded childcare to get women into the workforce. Universal childcare would create jobs, and the fiscal surplus generated would mean no net cost to taxpayers. And childcare workers need better wages to ensure their own economic security and also to encourage their retention in the field. We hear again and again the cost to families of unaffordable childcare. Women who tend to earn less than their male counterparts because there is no pay equity legislation in Canada. This government still has not legislated it. When there is a lack of access to affordable childcare, then it tends to be the woman that drops out of the workforce to look after kids. When she returns to the workforce, she tends to have only available to her part-time precarious work because, again, the woman tends, as throughout the world, but in Canada also, to do an unfair share of unpaid labor. And so not having access to unemployment insurance or pension contributions or benefits because they're working part-time work means that for many women they end up behind financially, and the lack of affordable childcare is at the root of it. My own sister and her husband had to leave Toronto because their childcare costs were more than their rent. That's not sustainable for young families. It's not a good investment. So last month, the OECD was in Ottawa investigating Canada's commitment to its feminist agenda and its gender lens on policies and programs. The OECD had observed previously about Canada that affordability and quality in childcare overall in Canada is still an issue, quote, forcing many women to drop out of the labour market or reduce their working hours during childbearing years. This affects women's earning levels. Full-time employed women in Canada earn on average 19% less than men. Just on Friday, I was at a launch of the State of the Child report, which is done every couple of years in Nanaimo. It was the Greater Nanaimo Early Years Partnership, and I really applaud their work. They hosted all government agencies, all level of governments. They found in their report Friday, children in my riding, Nanaimo Ladysmith, living in poverty, children between the ages of 0 and 5, it has increased to 24% of the population. It's a terrible number, and it reflects lack of access to government services and lack of employment support in our community. There's good news on the horizon. The IMF says that the Liberals could afford to spend $8 billion a year on childcare, and the program would pay for itself. So I ask, through the Speaker, the government, why in 2016 and 2017 did their budget allocate no money for new childcare spaces? Increasing the Canada tax child benefit doesn't help if there aren't places to spend that money.
Secretary.
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of National Defence. Mr. Speaker, first of all, I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for Nanaimo Ladysmith for having raised this important question about childcare in Canada in the House. Family is the most important part of our lives. We all want our children to be happy and to have everything that they need to get a good start in life. Our children represent the future of Canada, and we all need to do everything we can to help them achieve their full potential. Despite this, only 1 in 4 children in Canada has access to high-quality childcare services. For far too many families, the lack of affordable, high-quality childcare leads them to have to make difficult choices. Some parents have to give up their career because they don't have the means to pay for childcare, while others have to take on a second job to make ends meet. No one should have to make these difficult choices. Childcare services should be inclusive. So what are we doing about this? Our government recognizes that high-quality childcare services for the first years of life are essential to to children's social, emotional, and cognitive development. A year ago, in Budget 2016, our government proposed an investment of $500 million for early childhood learning and childcare, including funding of $100 million for Aboriginal children. And that's just the beginning. This year, in Budget 2017, we are proposing investing $7 billion over 10 years in order to support high-quality, flexible, and affordable childcare services all across Canada and to create new childcare spots. And we will get there. On June 12th, federal, provincial, and territorial governments agreed on the creation of a multilateral framework for early learning and childcare. This framework establishes a long-term vision in which all children will be able to benefit from an enriching environment in a place where there is preschool learning offered as well as high-quality childcare. Since then, 3 other provinces have joined bilateral agreements, and in the coming weeks and months, we will continue to work with our provincial and territorial partners. In total, $1.2 billion will be allocated to meet each jurisdiction's unique needs when it comes to childcare and early childhood learning. Together, we can develop action plans, track progress, and ensure that low-income or moderate-income families have access to affordable childcare services. Furthermore, we're developing a preschool learning framework with our Aboriginal partners. This framework will reflect the unique cultural needs of First Nations children, as well as Inuit and Métis children all across Canada. We are working closely with provinces and territories, as well as stakeholders and people with relevant expertise, to improve the collection and distribution of important data about childhood early learning. In fact, we're investing $95 million to fill shortcomings related to data so that we can have a better understanding of childcare services in Canada and ensure that we are properly tracking progress. We will also be investing $100 million in innovation in this area so that we can find new ways of helping our children achieve their full potential. Together, we can give each child in this country what they deserve, an equal chance of success. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Nanaimo, Ladysmith.
So here's the difficulty. The government has announced that it's lifting 300,000 kids out of poverty, but they won't provide the numbers so we can't verify that number. They have increased the Canada Child Benefit. That's a nice thing, especially if it was paired with increases in creating new childcare spaces now. Most Western countries do this, but Canada federally still hasn't. The budget in 2016 and 2017 creates no new childcare spaces. Now, childcare advocates like the Canadian Childcare Federation say that the extra money in the Canada Child Benefit will help families pay the bills, but with no new childcare spaces, there's nowhere to spend that money on childcare. It doesn't make childcare any cheaper. Morna Ballantyne of the Childcare Advocacy Association of Canada says, quote, all the evidence show that cash payments to parents will not make childcare services more accessible and will not resolve the crisis that is putting children, families, and economic growth at risk. What will the government do to help families and working women now with affordable childcare?
Honourable Secretary Parlementaire.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of National Defence. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. All Canadian children deserve to have an equal chance at success. We believe that the quality of early learning and childcare services provide a solid foundation for their future success. That's why the Minister of Employment, Workforce Development and Labour is working closely with provinces and territories to ensure that we can offer childhood and early learning services that improve the quality of life of children and their families. Funding agreements over 3 years with provinces and territories have already been set up as part of the multilateral framework for childcare and early learning. By signing this agreement with the provinces and territories, we've taken historic steps towards supporting Canadian families. And we are helping families who need it the most with childcare.